A very common scenario when workshops are being set up is that a coordinator of some sorts approaches an expert of some sort to ask about his or her willingness and availability to contribute. Should the expert say yes, then the conversation tends to move towards practicalities of when and where and how and for how long. I find that very little focus of such discussions is about what participants are supposed to learn and how one can design the event to actually maximize that learning. And this, to me, is a terrible shame, but it isn't very surprising, because learning theories, that's not common knowledge. Neither the expert nor the coordinator tends to have a lot of know-how of formulas and designs that scientists have proven to work. But I think there's something else at play. I want to borrow a quote from Stephen Hawkins, who has said that the greatest enemy to knowledge isn't ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge. And I actually think that's at play here. All of us, we have attended workshops and seminars to the extent that I think that we know how it is supposed to look like, and we imitate the kind of events that we have been participants in. And oftentimes those too are designed without proper pedagogical acumen. Certainly when I was approached as an expert, this is exactly how it looked like. Do I want to come? Can I come? When and where? And potentially about fees. And admittedly, when I was in the role of the coordinator, that's also how I started off in the olden days. But I don't do that anymore. Now I have a whole different setup. And I want to teach you. Because actually it is quite easy. In my opinion, and many pedagogues with me would say that one of the most important things is to formulate objectives or goals for what the participants are supposed to walk away with after the event. And there's a simple formula for that, and I call it the ABC formula. A stands for audience. That means that the expert for a while needs to forget about himself or herself and change the perspective and step into the shoes of the participants. What does their working day look like? What are the circumstances? What are their previous knowledge? What are their receptiveness? How much can they handle? You can imagine you can imagine being stuck in a red light all until you have really changed your perspective and you are thinking, you're pretending that you are in the shoes of the audience. Now, the B stands for behavior. And that means that participants, the behavior means that you select a verb, an observable, measurable verb that the participants will perform during the event. I'll return to that in a little while. I'll just put C here. First, C stands for content. It's only when you have taken the perspective of the participant, of the audience, A, you have decided on the behavior that you want the participant to have as a consequence of attending the workshop. Only then do you move on to decide what content is relevant and necessary in order to help the participants to perform that. A is a constant, and C is what only you uniquely know about your subject matter expertise, so I won't be talking about that, which leaves us with B for behavior. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of useful verbs that you can choose from, but I'll just mention a few here in the video, and you'll find several more in the transcript with bonus material. An observable verb could be that participants are able to define some terminology. You might want them to be able to explain something, to discuss, possibly to propose something. All of these verbs are such that you can ask the participants to do them during the event, all while you're observing them, and you get to see whether they eventually are able to do that. That means that they are observable and thus measurable. There are plenty of verbs that are super observable and measurable in a workshop, but are still not necessarily the best ones for a learning objective. The other thing, except for asking yourself whether you can observe the participants performing that very selected verb in the workshop, is to ask yourself, is that behavior transferable from the classroom to real life circumstances? If the answer is no, they don't need to do that, that's just something that I want to check to see whether they understood, well, then it's certainly a measurable learning objective, but it isn't necessarily the most useful from the participant's perspective. Verbs like to draft or to propose something are often quite transferable. It would be easy to imagine that these participants will sit in a working group and continue with a draft all until they have something to hand over to the next level, or that they would analyze a situation and then make proposals or make adjustments based on those. It doesn't mean that the workshop needs to actually complete the whole task, but more that it is like a kind of training camp where you're actually performing the same task that you will then continue with more elaboration and detail and time outside the workshop. If you have observable, measurable verbs that you can see as the participants are performing them during the workshop, and you can imagine that this is a useful skill for them to take with them into real life, then you have an excellent starting point for the rest of your design.